me, top of mind right now is staffing. I just came off working all weekend and a 16-hour day on Monday, so that's gonna be top of mind. We have project activity through the roof right now, and, you know, Brandy is able to support some research and things like that, but the lion's share of that falls on me. And then we have the people who expect that we do the one-off questions, and we wanna do that. We wanna support every person who calls and says, hey, we're thinking of moving there, where's their good internet? We wanna be responsive to all of that, and that's just a challenge when you have a department of two. The other thing I think is the uncertainty that seems to keep rolling around, and you know, you don't ever get rid of politics in any model. I think that's been kind of clear, especially with the Rockingham going from private back to public. But I think the thing that can help us succeed the most is to stay on a course and have stability in our staff. I appreciated how Jennifer said that everybody knew their role in Wilson. Chamber knew that they did business support, and she knew she did industrial recruitment, and they had a downtown development that even had 2 boards and did recruitment for downtown. They had a TDA, and they all worked well together, but everybody had a piece of it. And since I've been with the county, there's been 4 chamber presidents. So Alicia was the longest running, and we had a great relationship and a lot of synergy between our department and her. But since then, it's not really been, you know, consistent long enough. Lisa was great, and we had some things planned with her to do events to support manufacturing and whatnot. I really appreciated her vision for the chamber, but then unexpectedly, you know, she needed to move on, and I think Sam is great, but she's not had a chance to really get in there and put her mark on things, and we find ourselves just in a situation where all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you know, there's all this growth and activity happening, and it's hard for us to even get on a call together.
That's a good point. Do you get any help out of the state EDC people? You know, does anybody bring you prospects from the state?
Yes, I have a great relationship with them, and I think they're great. I mean, anytime you've got, you know, 5 or 8 people, you're gonna have your favorites that you work better with, or that you prefer to have projects you work with. But, I mean, I heard, you know, Lee's comment about that, but I think what you heard from the others who have been on the North Carolina side was positive, and my experience has been positive. So I don't know if that was just a difference between what she experienced in Virginia that we don't have to compare to, or if it was just kind of a one project situation. But Hollywood, for example, you know, they brought us that lead, but as soon as I had the contact with the company, it was me and him from then on out, just like she said, very hands-on. And I think Tommy, Keith, I think 3 of you were at that announcement, you know, and they alluded to that. You know, it was the immediate responses that we got that, you know, allowed us to beat out South Carolina with a building on the interstate. So that's been my experience, and nobody from the state had any problems with me jumping in and saying, okay, you're gonna be the carbon copy from here on out, and we got this.
What's our collaboration like with Durham?
I had an excellent working relationship with Timothy Downs, who was there before, and he just left at the end of last year. In fact, he went on to a consulting engineering firm, and we still stay in touch a lot. Ryan Reagan, who just came from Asheville, you know, on LinkedIn, everybody knows everybody in economic development. It's a small world. So through RTRP, we've engaged a little bit, but we haven't started doing the in-person meetings yet. But I know them very well. We did a manufacturing sector partnership, or we attempted to. We went down that road for many months, and it was kind of a mismatch with them having 115 manufacturers and us having 15 manufacturers, and trying to marry that up. But that was intended to be an opportunity to, you know, grow our manufacturing sector with the whole region. And Timothy was the only one willing to do a regional partnership with us. We've reached out to several counties, and it could be bandwidth, so I'm not, you know, I totally understand that, but, yeah, they've been great partners.
What knocks us out of the running? When you see prospective businesses looking at Person County and they have a cut list, you know, for some reason don't have an airport, don't have a community college, whatever it is. What is it now that we're lacking that you hear from those? Well, you don't have this. What would that be?
Well, we don't have a building ready right now, and, I had one unique opportunity where somebody reached out to me directly. They were looking for an existing building, but they said, somebody on our board, they were from another state, somebody on our board has Person County ties and says, we really need to look there. So we're willing to consider a build to suit in your community. And so, you know, Cecil knows that I reached out to them and several people who have done development in the past with properties. And we really tried to put a deal together for that, but when it came down to it, it was for a new building, it was gonna be, you know, between $5 and $8 a square foot for a lease rate. And they were in distribution, and they were able to find an existing building in another community at under $3 a square foot on the interstate. And, you know, they said, we really would like to have that relationship, but we just can't make that work. And I think that ultimately they didn't even come to North Carolina.
So you mentioned the other EDC directors and knowing them. Do you have a annual conference or something you get together at, or how does that work?
I'm a member of the North Carolina Economic Development Association, NCEDA, and that is a very active group. They have a spring conference, an annual conference, and a fall conference. Typically don't do all three, but I usually will do the spring conference, which is shorter, and then the annual conference. So that again has been virtual for the last couple of years, so sometimes it can seem like there's a lot of turnover in economic development, and there may be some people I haven't met, like Brian, in person. But yeah, most of the folks around the region I know very well. And it's through RTRP here as much as it is through NCEDA. And that's Research Triangle Regional Partnership. I think maybe you served on the EDC or PCBSC
EDC,
before,
yeah.
so I'm sure you're familiar with that organization.
Sherry, what are the term lengths for the directors of both the EDC and the PBCIC board?
This time around, they were appointed for 5 years, and so that term expires June 30th of next year.
And when you say they were all appointed at once?
They were all appointed at once, yes.
Do you think there would be benefit to staggering the expiration of terms just for continuity? And maybe you can't speak to it because they're only finishing their first term, but it
Yeah, I
just
haven't
seems to me
seen
like that
that.
might be a best practice, I don't know.
We did have it staggered, but I would anticipate that, you know, some of them would reapply and we'd still have that continuity.
And they can serve how many consecutive terms, do you know?
I don't think that was capped.
Okay.
Do you know Ted Budd?
Congressman Bud, yes. Yeah,
Did you see the letter he wrote recently?
I did, yes.
Yeah,
So
he'd come in here and had meetings with with Gordon and 9 other people, and then we had, on a subsequent visit, we sent him to Sherry.
I sent an email to Kyle Bridges on his staff, and we communicate pretty regularly, and I forwarded him a link about, you know, freight trucks being affected by the semiconductor shortage, and reminded him of the excellent opportunity here with our permitted site and the executive order for the president. And he said, okay, I think this is great, I'm gonna take this and run with it. I also sent it to Senator Burr and Senator Tillis, and they responded back, you know, just with a thank you for keeping us reminded, and we'll keep this in mind, but, Kyle actually had a letter written for the US Secretary of Commerce and sent it there, and so then we've used that letter for projects that we've worked, and to make sure that Commerce knows about the letter, and EDPNC knows about the letter. And, so I was very impressed with how responsive he was with that.
Kyle, before going on Ted Budd's staff, worked in economic development. He has a background. He said Sherry was really instrumental in getting that information together for them. It was very helpful.
They also came up and toured Hollywood, maybe last month.
Mhm.
Congressman Bud.
Beyond the staffing, do you see any other areas that the private side sector board could help in which ways?
I
It's
mean,
like a wish list. I mean,
Yeah.
there's some things out there that obviously not covered. Have you put anything like that or thoughts on that?
you know, input, guidance, momentum, when you see that somebody else is willing to put money in, and the investment that they get back out of that and the opportunities, I think that it rolls over, creates momentum for others, makes it more attractive.
Those are themes that we've heard from others too. You know, and if you get the local business community convinced that economic development is in their best interest, then they'll support it with funding, but maybe support it even more importantly with, you know, some of the intangibles.
We need a modern day Jay Long. You know who Jay Long was?
Too long.
Long?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was the first developer, I guess, the
Yeah.
first county.
I had a great conversation with, a guy who's a developer. He was helping us with our shell building analysis from the School of Government, but he also does private development, and, he said he was just thinking, you know, going back to the railroad and how towns were built out around the railroads. What's the railroad now that growth can center around? And so he always does his development in uptowns, because he said, you know, the railroad brought the need for lodging, and then that brought the need for food and clothing and, you know, general merchandising, and so that's kind of the only place he focuses is downtown areas.
Well, you didn't mention the, a limitation being, access to an interstate, so does that come up a lot?
It's a great question.
Every-
I was thinking
yeah.
that too.
Every deal.
Every day?
If 501 was restricted access border to border, it would not be so much of an issue, but when you've gotta go through the city of Roxborough, no bypass around the stoplights and the traffic, it comes up every time we get dinged on that.
What other challenges do we have, Sherry?
Sometimes, people don't think that we can meet their workforce needs. I think that a lot of the projects now are life sciences, and they wanna be in RTP, they want that address, they want that research and development collaboration, or their distribution, and we're too remote. I think that we could benefit from diversifying what we're going after. And David and I have talked about, you know, let's try to grow our tech sector here. And I think now that we have even more opportunity because of COVID and the fiber that we have, if we can get that lit and serving people, and people being able to work from home, being this close to Durham, I think that's an opportunity, you know, maybe providing some better paying jobs than some of the manufacturing, but manufacturing still has the biggest multiplier effect for the induced and indirect jobs.
Do you know how many people drive to Durham now to work? At one time it was like 8,000 people.
Yeah, it's a little less now, you know, it's still over 7,000,
I heard 7,900, some recently.
yes. Well, not just to Durham, but who commute out. And when you pull those numbers, they include a lot of things, but still, yeah, it's a big number that we definitely want to turn around.
From a budget and funding perspective, do you think it's preferred to have funding that you can use at your discretion, or an economic development department can use at its discretion, BRE versus attraction of new business or courtship of new business? Or do you think it would be better to have separate funding sources? It sounded to me like some of the counties where the departments are split, there's more county money going towards BRE and more of the private funding going towards attraction and retention. And I guess that's because the private businesses would be more inclined to put their money into bringing new business with whom they could do business, as opposed to a private business potentially investing money so that their neighbor or worse yet competitor could expand. But the county would be funding more of the BRE, figuring that they're just sort of recirculating some of the tax revenues that business is generating and allowing them to expand, which would create more tax revenues and sort of perpetuate.
I hadn't thought of anybody who really breaks it out or separates it. I know Mac was talking about having to go to the private funds when he was doing things that, might involve, I think he called it wining and dining or something
Yeah, I
like
was
that.
thinking more the attraction there
Right.
of new business.
Well, for us, that would just be because we couldn't buy alcohol with public money and the public scrutiny if you took somebody out to dinner or something. I wanted to send some Tunnel Creek wine and some gift baskets to some travel we usually do that we couldn't do in person, and I thought that would be very impactful and make a great statement about the county, but, I couldn't buy it, but I also couldn't ship it. I found out that's illegal, so that worked out okay.
Can Tunnel Creek ship it?
They could, but it was going in a basket from EDC with different counties. So, yeah, we.
But the
sent-
chamber
Yeah,
could
well,
have, the chamber could have done it,
private
right?
money.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is one reason, but yeah, I hadn't heard of anybody saying that the private sector didn't really want to invest in existing industry support because I think they just see it as a pot that churns. Now we do hear companies that don't like it. They didn't like the Pollywood announcement because that was gonna be competition for them, for their jobs. So that's a challenge. Jennifer talked about that and maybe Lee did too. Thinking about, Kevin, he seemed like he was still kind of thinking, he wasn't too sure they had the support they needed with their model, it seemed like. So, it's always a work in progress.
That's when we need to remind them of the property tax rate. Those companies that say, I don't want competition in here, you don't want investment in the county for increasing your tax base? Well, something's wrong with that, because it may lower their taxes in the long run. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. I think the biggest struggle right now with everybody though is finding skilled workers. They'd rather pay more out, and have the good people, not have the turnover.
Any other questions?
Very helpful.
Great. Do you have any questions for these guys?
No, I would just, in closing, kind of rhetorically, just consider, what do you hope the money would be for? Specialized things that you think need to happen, and I know you've been careful to keep your focus to finding the model and letting somebody else figure out, how it's spent necessarily, or who carries out the duties and makes those directional decisions, but surely you have some presuppositions to what you think needs to be happening. So just, maybe kind of think about that when you're examining the models, and how they're used in other counties. I think, I would wanna remind you that we are doing well. We're okay. We have the growth, it's coming this way. And, in a 30 or 45-minute presentation from some other counties, that you would not kind of romanticize what goes on in other places, because everybody has their issues. And then the last thing would probably be to maybe temper your expectations, and I know that everybody values what you all are doing and the time you're putting into it, but it does have to be something that everybody can get on board with to make a change. Otherwise, another group will come in the next time and change it right back. We've seen that so many times. And I'm not sure about the timing, like I said, going out and doing fundraising. And if the county wants to engage Rick, he can probably give him some guidance on what he's been seeing with fundraising right now, because I know some other counties are coming up on their time to recycle those requests.
Okay, great.
All good points, thank you.
Thank you so much, and thank you very much for jumping through hoops